The sun hung low over the Montana prairie, painting the grasslands in shades of copper and gold. Marcus Webb had been riding fence lines since dawn, checking for breaks where his cattle might wander through. At 53, he'd spent more years on horseback than most men spend alive, and he knew every hill and hollow of his 10,000 acres. The land spoke to him in ways city folk would never understand. Today, though, something felt wrong. The air carried a tension he couldn't name, like the moment before lightning strikes. His horse, a steady mare named Sable, suddenly threw her head up and nickered. Marcus pulled the reins, scanning the horizon. That's when he saw it, a covered wagon sitting motionless in the distance, its white canvas torn and flapping in the wind. No smoke from a cooking fire. No movement. No sounds of life. Just stillness where there should have been activity. Marcus urged Sable forward, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle in his saddle holster. You didn't survive 40 years of ranching without learning caution. As he drew closer, details emerged that made his stomach tighten. The wagon's canvas was shredded, not by weather but by something violent. Supplies were scattered across the ground. A trunk lay on its side, contents spilled like entrails. And then he heard it, a sound so faint he almost missed it beneath the wind. A child crying. He dismounted quickly, his boots hitting the hard earth with purpose. The crying grew louder as he rounded the wagon. What he found there would stay with him until his dying day. A little girl, no more than 5 years old, sat in the dirt beside the wagon's wheel. Her dress was filthy, her face streaked with tears and dust. In her arms, she clutched a doll made of corn husks, holding it like a lifeline. But it was her eyes that struck him hardest, wide, terrified, and far too old for such a young face. Hey there, little one, Marcus said softly, kneeling down to her level. He kept his distance, not wanting to frighten her further. My name's Marcus. Can you tell me yours? The girl stared at him without speaking. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. Marcus looked around, dread building in his chest. Where were her parents? He called out, his voice carrying across the empty prairie. Hello? Anyone here? Only silence answered him. He walked around the wagon, checking inside, hoping to find adults who might be injured or hiding. The interior was chaos, blankets torn, food supplies ransacked, personal belongings destroyed. But no people. No bodies. Nothing. He returned to the girl, his mind racing through possibilities, none of them good. Bandits? Unlikely this far north. Animals? The damage didn't match. Whatever happened here had been swift and terrible. The girl watched him with those haunted eyes, and Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. He'd never had children of his own. His wife Sarah had died of fever 15 years ago, taking their unborn son with her. Since then, his ranch had been his family, his cattle his children. But this little girl, alone and terrified beside this abandoned wagon, awakened something he thought had died with Sarah. Are you hurt? He asked gently. The girl shook her head slightly. Are you hungry? A small nod this time. Marcus pulled a piece of dried beef from his still bag and offered it to her. She took it with trembling fingers and ate mechanically, never taking her eyes off him. He needed to make a decision. Night would fall in a few hours, and the temperature would drop. He couldn't leave her here. Even if he wanted to, and God help him, he didn't, his conscience wouldn't allow it. Listen, Marcus said, choosing his words carefully. I have a ranch about 10 miles from here. It's warm. Safe. I can give you food, a place to sleep. Would you come with me? The girl stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she reached up her small hand. Marcus took it, feeling how cold her fingers were, how they trembled in his calloused palm. As he lifted her onto Sable, settling her in front of the saddle, he looked back at the ruined wagon one last time. Whatever story it held, whatever horror had unfolded here, he'd piece it together later. Right now, this child needed him. And Marcus Webb had never walked away from someone in need. The ranch house stood against the darkening sky, its windows glowing with lamplight like welcoming eyes. Marcus had built it himself 20 years ago, back when dreams still felt possible. Now it felt too large, too quiet, echoing with memories of what might have been. As Sable's hooves clopped onto the packed dirt of the yard, the girl stirred against his chest. She'd fallen asleep during the ride, exhausted from whatever ordeal she'd endured. He could feel her tiny heartbeat, rapid like a bird's. His ranch hand, Tom Henderson, emerged from the barn, his weathered face creasing with confusion. Tom had worked the ranch for 8 years and knew Marcus's routines better than anyone. Bringing home a child definitely wasn't part of them. Boss? Tom called out, approaching carefully. What in God's name? Found her out by Miller's Creek, Marcus interrupted, his voice low so as not to wake the girl. Alone beside a wagon. No sign of her people. Tom's expression shifted from confusion to concern. He'd seen enough of life's cruelty to understand the implications. I'll stable Sable, Tom said quietly. You get that little one inside and warm. Marcus carried the girl into the house, her weight almost nothing in his arms. The main room was exactly as he'd left it, sparse, functional, with none of the softness a woman's touch might have added. He set the girl gently on the sofa, covering her with a quilt his mother had made decades ago. She didn't wake, lost in the deep sleep of total exhaustion. Standing back, Marcus really looked at her for the first time in proper light. Her hair was dark brown, tangled with prairie grass and burrs. Her skin was sun-browned but showed traces of bruising on her arms. Her dress, though filthy, had once been well made, suggesting a family of some means. He moved to the kitchen, his mind working through practical matters because that's what Marcus did when emotions threatened to overwhelm him. The girl would need food, clean clothes, a proper bed. He had none of those things suitable for a child. His cupboards held beans, coffee, salt pork, flour, ranch fare, not nursery food. His clothes wouldn't fit her even if modified. And the spare bedroom held nothing but dust and forgotten furniture. Marcus was heating water for washing when Tom knocked and entered. Rode out with a lantern to check that wagon, Tom said, his voice grim. You need to see this. He pulled a leather journal from his coat, its pages stained and crumpled. Found it under the driver's seat. Marcus took it, his hands suddenly unsteady. The first page bore an inscription in elegant handwriting, The Journey West, Catherine Miller, April 1882. He flipped through pages documenting a family's trek from Pennsylvania. A woman named Catherine, her husband Robert, and their daughter Emma. The entries were cheerful at first, full of hope and excitement about starting fresh in Oregon territory. But as Marcus read further, the tone changed. Catherine wrote about trouble with their guide, about feeling watched, about Robert's growing paranoia. The final entry made Marcus's blood run cold. It was dated 3 days ago, the handwriting shaky and rushed. Robert is dead. The guide killed him for our money. He's coming back. I'm hiding Emma in the water barrel. If anyone finds this, her name is Emma Rose Miller. She's 5 years old. Please, please don't let her die alone out here. Tell her I loved her. Tell her. The entry ended abruptly, the pen trailing off the page. Marcus closed the journal, his jaw clenched so tight it ached. That little girl sleeping on his sofa had watched her father murdered. Her mother had hidden her, then likely died trying to protect her or fled to draw the killer away. Emma. Her name was Emma. He looked at her sleeping form, so small and vulnerable, and felt rage burning in his chest. Not at the girl, but at a world that could do this to an innocent child. Tom was watching him carefully. What do we do, boss? Marcus set the journal down with deliberate calm, though his insides churned. First, we care for the girl. She needs safety, stability, time to heal. Second, we ride into town tomorrow and talk to Sheriff Dawson. There's a murderer out there, and he needs catching. Tom nodded. And if they can't find her kin? The question hung in the air between them. Marcus looked at Emma again, at the tear tracks still visible on her dirty face, at the corn-husk doll clutched in her hand even in sleep. He thought of Sarah, of the son he'd never held, of all the years he'd spent alone in this house. Then we figure it out, he said finally. But tonight, she sleeps safe. That's enough for now. After Tom left, Marcus sat in his chair across from the sofa, keeping watch. Emma stirred occasionally, whimpering in her sleep, reaching for something that wasn't there. Each time, Marcus's heart broke a little more. He'd found this child by chance, but already he knew with absolute certainty that he couldn't let her go. Not to an orphanage. Not to strangers. Whatever came next, Emma Rose Miller wouldn't face it alone. Marcus Webb had found her beside that wagon, and he hadn't walked away. He wouldn't start now. Dawn broke cold and clear, painting frost across the windows. Marcus had barely slept, dozing fitfully in his chair while keeping watch over Emma. She'd woken twice during the night, both times gasping and crying out for her mother. Each time, Marcus had spoken to her softly, telling her she was safe, that he was there. She never answered, but she'd stopped crying when she heard his voice, and that felt like something. Now, in the gray morning light, she sat at his kitchen table, staring at a plate of eggs and biscuits. Marcus wasn't much of a cook, but he'd done his best. The food sat untouched. Emma held her corn-husk doll, rocking slightly, her eyes focused on nothing. Marcus had seen that look before, on soldiers returning from the war, on men who'd witnessed things that broke something inside them. Seeing it on a 5-year-old's face made him want to put his fist through the wall. "Emma," he said gently, using her name for the first time. Her eyes flickered toward him, showing the first real acknowledgement he'd seen. "I know you're scared. I know everything feels wrong right now. But you need to eat. Just a little." She looked down at the plate, then back at her doll. Marcus waited. Patience was something ranch life had taught him. You couldn't rush a spooked horse or a difficult carving. You couldn't rush a traumatized child either. After what felt like an eternity, Emma picked up a piece of biscuit. She nibbled at it mechanically, her movements slow and deliberate. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Marcus felt relief wash over him. While she ate, he studied her more carefully. In daylight, with some of the dirt washed from her face, he could see her mother's features in the shape of her eyes, her father's in the set of her jaw. He'd spent an hour last night reading through Catherine Miller's journal, learning about this family whose lives had been so brutally destroyed. Tom arrived as Emma finished eating. He'd brought something wrapped in cloth, his wife Martha's old sewing basket and some fabric. Martha heard about the situation, Tom explained, his voice quiet. "She's sending over proper clothes by this afternoon, but she thought you might need these." Marcus nodded gratefully. Martha Henderson had a generous heart, though she and Tom lived in town now. Their own children were grown and gone, but Martha still kept supplies for grandchildren who visited. "Emma," Marcus said, drawing her attention. "Tom and I need to ride into town to talk to the sheriff about what happened. I'd like you to come with us. You'll be safe there, I promise." Fear flashed across her face, sharp and immediate. She shook her head violently, clutching her doll tighter. Hey, Marcus said, kneeling beside her chair. "Nobody's going to take you anywhere you don't want to go. You're staying with me. But the sheriff needs to know what happened so he can find the man who hurt your family. Do you understand?" Emma stared at him, tears welling in her eyes. Then, for the first time since he'd found her, she spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper, hoarse from disuse and crying. "He had a scar. On his face. Like this." She traced a line from her left eye down to her jaw. Marcus felt electricity run through him. A description. A real, useful detail. "That's good, Emma. That's real good. What else can you remember about him?" She closed her eyes, and Marcus could see her trembling. He immediately regretted pushing. "It's okay. You don't have to," but Emma kept talking, the words coming out in a rush now, like a dam breaking. "He smiled when he shot Papa. Mama screamed and he laughed. She put me in the barrel and told me to be quiet, to not make any sound no matter what I heard. It was dark and I couldn't breathe good but I stayed quiet like she said. I heard Mama crying. Then I heard her stop. I stayed in the barrel all night. All the next day. I was so thirsty." Tears streamed down her face, but her voice remained steady, almost eerily so. "When I finally came out, they were gone. Mama, the man, everything. Just the wagon. I waited because Mama said they were coming back. But they didn't come back. Nobody came back except you." The last word broke on a sob, and suddenly Emma was crying in earnest, her small body shaking with the force of it. Marcus pulled her into his arms, letting her cry against his chest, feeling his own eyes burn with tears he refused to shed. Tom had to turn away, his jaw working. When Emma's sobs finally quieted to hiccups, Marcus pulled back enough to look at her. "You were so brave," he told her. "Your mama would be proud of how brave you were. And I promise you, Emma, I promise on everything I hold sacred, we will find this man. He will answer for what he did." The ride to town was tense. Emma sat in front of Marcus on sable, stiff and silent again, but she leaned back against him, seeking his warmth and protection. Sheriff Dawson listened to their story with a grave expression, writing down every detail Emma could provide. The scar was distinctive. A man matching that description had been seen 2 towns over, trying to sell a wagon team. Dawson would send telegrams immediately, coordinate with other lawmen. "What about the girl?" Dawson asked, looking at Emma with sympathy. "She got any kin we can contact?" Marcus hesitated. The journal had mentioned Catherine's parents in Pennsylvania, but they were elderly, possibly deceased by now. Robert's family had disowned him for marrying Catherine. "We're looking into it," Marcus said carefully. "Meanwhile, she's staying with me." Dawson raised an eyebrow but nodded. "All right. But Marcus, you know this ain't permanent unless you go through proper channels. Territory's got rules about orphans." Marcus's hand tightened on Emma's shoulder. "I'm aware, Sheriff. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. As they left the sheriff's office, Emma looked up at Marcus. What's permanent mean? She asked, her voice small. Marcus knelt down, meeting her eyes. It means staying. Not leaving. Emma, I know you just met me, and I know you're scared. But I want you to stay on my ranch. For as long as you need. Maybe even forever, if that's what you want. Would that be okay? Emma studied his face for a long moment, those two old eyes searching for something. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her because she nodded slowly. Then, so quietly he almost missed it, she whispered, "Okay, Mr. Webb." Marcus felt something settle in his chest, something that felt suspiciously like purpose. "You can call me Marcus," he said gently. Emma considered this, then shook her head. "Papa said I should call grown-ups Mr. and Mrs." Her voice caught on the word Papa. Marcus squeezed her hand. "Then Mr. Webb it is." 3 weeks passed like water flowing over stones, steady, persistent, changing everything gradually. Emma still barely spoke, but she'd started following Marcus around the ranch, a silent shadow watching everything he did. She observed him feeding the horses, mending fences, checking on the cattle in the near pastures. Marcus narrated his work, explaining what he was doing and why, though she rarely responded. But he could see her absorbing it all, those sharp eyes missing nothing. The nightmares were the hardest part. Almost every night, Emma woke screaming, calling for her mother, reliving that barrel's darkness. Marcus would rush to her room, the spare bedroom he'd cleaned and furnished with help from Martha Henderson, and sit with her until the terror passed. He'd learned not to touch her during these episodes unless she reached for him first. Trauma had made her skittish, and Marcus respected that, waiting for her to come to him on her terms. During the days, small changes emerged. Emma started eating without prompting. She'd begun playing with a kitten from the barn, though she still clutched her corn-husk doll constantly. Martha had sewn her 4 new dresses, and Emma had actually smiled when she saw them, a tiny crack in her grief. The smile lasted only seconds, but Marcus had seen it, and it gave him hope. Tom's wife visited twice a week, bringing baked goods and gentle feminine presence. Emma tolerated Martha's kindness but kept her emotional distance from everyone except Marcus. The breakthrough came on a cold afternoon in early November. Marcus was in the barn, treating a mare's injured hoof, when Emma appeared in the doorway. She'd been in the house with Martha, supposedly learning to knead bread dough. "Mr. Webb." Her voice was uncertain, wavering. Marcus looked up immediately. "What's wrong, Emma?" She twisted her hands together, the corn-husk doll dangling from her fingers. "Miss Martha says I should talk about what happened. She says keeping it inside makes it worse. Is that true?" Marcus set down his tools and gestured to a hay bale. Emma sat, and he settled beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Sometimes it is," he said honestly. "Feelings are like infected wounds. You've got to clean them out or they fester. But talking's hard, especially about painful things. You don't have to do it until you're ready." Emma was quiet for a long moment, staring at her doll. When she spoke, her voice was small but determined. "I want to tell you about my mama and papa. The real them, before. Not just the bad parts." Marcus's throat tightened. "I'd like that very much." And so Emma talked. Haltingly at first, then with growing confidence, she painted a picture of her family. Robert Miller had been a school teacher, educated and kind, who read to Emma every night. Catherine had sung constantly while cooking, her voice sweet and clear. They'd left Pennsylvania seeking adventure and opportunity, believing Oregon held their future. Emma described Sunday picnics, her father's terrible jokes, her mother's famous apple pie, the imaginary games they'd played while the wagon rolled west. "Mama made my doll," Emma said, holding it up. "She said it would keep me safe, that she put all her love into making it. When I was in the barrel, I held it and pretended Mama was holding me." Tears streamed down her face, but she kept talking. "I miss them so much it hurts, Mr. Webb. Right here." She pressed her hand to her chest. "Like something's broken inside that won't ever fix." Marcus's own eyes burned. "I know that feeling, Emma. I lost my wife, Sarah, a long time ago. And you're right, some broken things don't fix. But you learn to carry them. The hurt gets lighter eventually, I promise. And talking about them, remembering the good times, that helps. It keeps them alive in here." He tapped his chest, mirroring her gesture. Emma looked at him with those devastating eyes. "Does it stop hurting?" Marcus shook his head gently. "No. But it hurts less. And one day, you'll remember them and smile before you cry. That's how you know you're healing." Emma nodded slowly, processing this. Then she did something that shocked Marcus to his core. She scooted closer and leaned against his side, her small body seeking comfort. Marcus froze, afraid to move, afraid to breathe and break this fragile moment of trust. Slowly, carefully, he put his arm around her shoulders. Emma didn't pull away. They sat like that in the barn's quiet warmth, two wounded souls finding solace in shared grief. That night, when Emma woke from a nightmare, Marcus came to her room as always. But this time, when he sat beside her bed, she reached for his hand and held it. "Will you tell me about Sarah?" she asked. Marcus was surprised but nodded. He talked about his wife, about their brief marriage, about the baby they'd lost. He'd never spoken of these things to anyone, but somehow, sharing his pain with this grieving child felt right. It felt like healing for both of them. "Do you think they're together?" Emma asked suddenly. "Mama and Papa and Sarah and your baby? In heaven or wherever people go?" Marcus considered this carefully. "I'd like to think so. I'd like to think they're all somewhere beautiful, watching over us and hoping we'll be okay." Emma was quiet, then whispered, "I think they'd want us to take care of each other." Marcus squeezed her hand gently. "I think you're absolutely right." News came the next day. Sheriff Dawson rode out personally to deliver it. The man with the scar, a guide named Jack Thornton, had been caught trying to cross into Canada. He'd confessed to multiple murders, including Robert and Catherine Miller. He'd hang for his crimes. The sheriff also brought other news. They'd located Catherine's parents in Pennsylvania. Both were alive but in poor health, too frail to travel or care for a child. They'd written a letter, expressing grief over their daughter's death and gratitude that Emma had survived. They gave permission for Emma to be placed with whatever good Christian family was willing. Marcus read the letter while Emma stood beside him, her hand gripping his sleeve. When he finished, he looked at Dawson. "What needs to happen for me to become her legal guardian?" The sheriff blinked in surprise, then smiled slowly. "You serious about this, Marcus?" Marcus looked down at Emma, at this brave, broken little girl who'd somehow worked her way into his guarded heart. "As serious as I've ever been about anything." Emma looked up at him, her eyes wide and hopeful, filled with a desperate need to belong somewhere again. Dawson explained the process: petitions, court appearances, evaluations. It would take time, possibly months. Emma would remain in Marcus's care during the process unless someone challenged it. "Marcus," Dawson said seriously, "raising a child alone ain't easy. Especially a girl. Especially one who's been through what she has. You sure about this?" Marcus thought about his empty house, his solitary life, the years he'd spent just existing rather than living. Then he thought about Emma following him around the ranch, about her hand in his during nightmares, about the weight of her trust. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Sheriff." Winter came to Montana with teeth bared, bringing snow that buried the prairie in white silence. The ranch settled into its cold weather rhythms, and Emma settled into them too. Marcus had started teaching her to read better, her father had begun the process, but there was much she didn't know. Every evening after supper, they'd sit by the fire, working through primers and simple books. Emma absorbed knowledge like parched earth absorbing rain, hungry for learning in a way that reminded Marcus of her father's profession. The legal process moved with frustrating slowness. Papers had to be filed, investigations conducted, reports written. A stern woman from the Territorial Orphan Services came to inspect the ranch, interviewing both Marcus and Emma separately. Marcus had been terrified she'd find him unsuitable, a gruff, unmarried rancher with no experience raising children. But Emma, with more courage than he knew she possessed, had spoken clearly about wanting to stay, about feeling safe with Mr. Webb, about finally having a home again after losing everything. On Christmas morning, Marcus woke to find Emma standing beside his bed, her cornhusk doll in one hand and something else in the other. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Webb," she said softly. She held out a piece of paper, a drawing she'd made with pencils Martha had given her. It showed the ranch house, crude but recognizable, with two stick figures holding hands in front. One tall, one small. Above it, in careful letters, she'd written home. Marcus's vision blurred as he took the drawing. "Emma, this is the best gift I've ever received." He'd prepared something for her too, a new doll he'd ordered from a catalog, with a porcelain face and real hair. But when he gave it to her, Emma held it for only a moment before setting it aside. She picked up her cornhusk doll instead. "This one's still my favorite," she explained. "Because Mama made it. But I'll keep the new one too, because you gave it to me. That makes it special." January brought the final court hearing. Judge Morrison reviewed all the documentation, the investigation reports, the letters from Catherine's parents blessing the arrangement. He called Emma to the bench, speaking to her with unexpected gentleness. "Miss Miller, do you understand what's happening here today?" Emma nodded seriously. "Mr. Webb wants to be my legal guardian. That means he'll take care of me and make decisions for me until I'm grown." "And is that what you want?" the judge asked. Emma looked back at Marcus, who stood in the gallery with his hat in his hands, nervous as he'd never been, even facing down rustlers or wild animals. Emma turned back to the judge. "Yes, sir. Mr. Webb found me when I was alone and scared. He didn't have to help me, but he did. He's patient and kind, and he makes me feel safe. He tells me about my mama and papa when I ask, and he doesn't get mad when I cry. He's teaching me to read and to ride horses and to be brave even when I'm scared. I don't have my first family anymore, but Mr. Webb feels like family now. Is that okay?" The courtroom was silent. The judge cleared his throat, visibly moved. "Yes, Miss Miller. That's more than okay. That's exactly how it should be." He stamped the papers with finality. "Marcus Webb, you are hereby granted legal guardianship of Emma Rose Miller, with all rights and responsibilities therein. Congratulations to you both." The ride back to the ranch was quiet, but it was a peaceful quiet, not the traumatized silence of those early days. Emma sat in front of Marcus on Sable, watching the winter landscape roll past. "Mr. Webb," she said suddenly. "Yes, Emma?" She hesitated, then asked the question that had clearly been weighing on her. "My name's still Miller, right? Not Webb." Marcus had wondered about this himself. Legally, her name remained Emma Rose Miller unless they went through formal adoption, which was a separate, more complex process. "That's right. You're still a Miller. That's your family name, from your mama and papa. That doesn't change." Emma was quiet for a moment. "Good. I want to keep their name. But maybe someday, if it's okay, I could be Emma Rose Miller Webb? So I have both families?" Marcus's throat closed up. He had to wait several seconds before he could speak. "I think that would be just fine, Emma. Just fine." Spring arrived slowly, winter releasing its grip reluctantly. The prairie began showing green again, wildflowers pushing through thawed earth. Emma was 7 now, having passed her 6th birthday quietly in February. She'd grown taller, healthier, the haunted look in her eyes gradually replaced by something brighter, though shadows still lingered. She'd never forget her first family. Marcus made sure of that, talking about them regularly, keeping their memory alive and honored. She'd also begun truly living again. She had friends now, children from neighboring ranches who came to visit. She laughed, something Marcus had thought he might never hear. She'd learned to ride on a gentle gelding named Copper, and she helped with ranch chores appropriate for her age. She still had nightmares, though less frequently. She still cried for her parents sometimes. But she also smiled. She also played. She also looked forward to tomorrow instead of being trapped in yesterday. One morning in May, Marcus found Emma standing by the fence, looking out at the prairie where he'd first discovered her. He joined her silently, following her gaze. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked. "Every day," Marcus admitted. "I think about how close I came to riding a different direction. How I almost didn't hear you crying. How easily I might have missed you entirely." Emma slipped her hand into his. "But you didn't miss me. You found me. And you stayed." Marcus squeezed her hand gently. "And I'll keep staying, Emma. For as long as you'll have me." She looked up at him, this little girl who'd lost everything and somehow found the strength to trust again. "Forever, then," she said simply. "I'll have you forever." Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He'd been alone for so long, his heart locked away after Sarah's death. He'd never imagined opening it again, never thought he'd have a family. But a rancher had found a child alone beside a wagon. And he hadn't walked away. That single decision had changed 2 lives irrevocably, weaving together 2 broken stories into something whole. Emma had needed someone to save her, to give her safety and love and a future. Marcus hadn't known it, but he'd needed saving too, from loneliness, from merely existing, from a life without purpose or joy. They stood together in the morning sun, guardian and ward, rancher and rescued child, 2 souls who'd found each other in the vast emptiness of the prairie. Behind them, the ranch house stood solid and welcoming. Ahead, the prairie stretched endlessly, full of possibility. Emma leaned against Marcus's side, and he put his arm around her shoulders. Whatever challenges tomorrow brought, they'd face them together. Because they were family now, not by blood, but by choice. And sometimes, Marcus thought, that was the strongest bond of all. The wagon where he'd found her was long gone, sold for scrap lumber. But the memory remained, a reminder of the day his life's purpose rolled back into focus. He'd found Emma beside that wagon. And thank God, he hadn't walked away.